There's gold in them thar hills, or at least that's what we've been told for the last 60 years, that Fort Knox has the country's gold reserves. Some people are beginning to question it. Here to help us figure it out is Dr. Jonathan Newman. Dr. Newman is a fellow with the Mrs. Institute. We've had other people from the Mrs. Institute on The Truth. He is a doctor, as in PhD, from Auburn University. We won't hold that against him as a Georgia Bulldog. But he also teaches economics and has just a wonderful resume. Um, can I call you Jonathan or John?
Yes, of course.
Which do you prefer?
Jonathan is great.
Jonathan. All right. I'm John. I'm just John. Is gold in Fort Knox?
It's a great question. I would love to see an audit of Fort Knox just so we can, an independent audit just so we can see. I think it's very suspicious that they wouldn't allow sitting U.S. senators to go in and inspect, just to even take a tour, see what was going on inside. So when you have that level of secrecy where you won't even let elected officials in, it makes people wonder. It makes people wonder if all of the gold that they say is there. Maybe there's more gold than they say is there. But of course, the issue, the implication of there being a mismatch between how much gold is there and how much gold they say is there is that it means that they've lied. It means that there have been these under the table, behind the scenes transactions between our government and other governments, perhaps, that the U.S. taxpayers and U.S. voters don't know about. I think that the gold holdings in Fort Knox and really the rest of them outside of Fort Knox, I think they're a vestige of the gold standard. And so I think it's great that this has been in the news and people are asking this question, is all the gold really there? Because it gets people thinking about what sound money is. What should money be? How should money operate? Should the government be in control of money?
Well, Rand Paul has been particularly vocal about it, not just recently, but for years. And like you said, they've steadfastly refused to allow him to enter Fort Knox. Who do they think they are anyway? I mean, who do they report to? I mean, if a United States Senator, duly elected from Kentucky no less, can't be given a tour of Fort Knox, it certainly does make me suspicious. As I think you alluded to, we're no longer on the gold standard. So what really is the significance of gold in Fort Knox? Is it material to our nation's balance sheet and our wealth?
I don't think that it is. I think it's basically a savings account. It's an emergency fund for the U.S. government, and it would have to be like an extreme crisis. There'd have to be a big collapse in demand for U.S. government debt, maybe a collapse in demand for the dollar. And I think they're holding on to the gold, assuming that it's there. They're holding on to it as a worst case scenario. The government would be able to purchase things from other countries in the case that the dollar no longer buys anything. So I think that, at least from what I can tell, that's the main purpose. And other authors at the Mises Institute, like Ryan McMakin, have written about that idea. But the reason why it's there is not because it backs the U.S. dollar. Nothing backs the U.S. dollar anymore. It's a pure, free-floating
faith and credit of the
money.
United States.
It's a piece of paper. And the reason why we use it as money today is because it has this history of being backed by gold. And so, but of course, over the 20th century, we went from a gold standard to this purely paper fiat money. And it was based on government interventions. It was based on the implementation of the U.S. Federal Reserve, the central bank. It was based on FDR confiscating gold in 1933. It was based on the Bretton Woods system that was enacted after World War II, and then the closure of the Bretton Woods system by Richard Nixon in August of 1971, to the point where now we have just this rogue central bank that can create money and buy the government's debt at will. There's really nothing that's constraining how much the government can spend and how much it can print to fund that spending.
Well, I think President Trump said that he thinks it's a good idea to go to Fort Knox and take a look and have an audit. Can they deny him entry?
That would be a spectacle. I would love to see that happen. But if they don't allow U.S. senators in there, I mean, there's no telling what would happen if the sitting U.S. president said that he wanted to take a look personally.
Well, if I was the president and they told me I couldn't come in, I would organize a small army and we'd just go
Yeah.
in and we'd fire the people that denied us the opportunity to come in. But
Absolutely.
there's obviously a reason that they don't want to admit people. Now, have they stolen it, loaned it, ravaged it? Who knows? I don't have a clue. And but I do want to know, and I think that's a fair expectation on the part of the American people, just to actually find out. And if it has been, if there is mischief, then people need to be held accountable. I grow less and less optimistic that that will happen. I mean, there doesn't seem to be accountability for anything if you work in government these days. And is that just
Yeah,
me, or do you share that?
there are some signs of hope with the DOGE, sort of basically breaking into agencies, starting to fire people, opening up some level of transparency. I'm not very optimistic that they'll be able to decrease total government spending by a significant amount, but we'll just have to see. The last numbers that I saw, in fact, it was in the Wall Street Journal this morning, is that Trump's spending so far is $154 billion more than it was in the previous year. So we've actually increased spending compared to last year. So, I mean, it could change. There could be an abrupt change where they start slashing and cutting spending. But we have to understand that even that would be very unpopular, and that would hurt, midterm election chances for the Republicans. It's a very difficult uphill climb to do such a thing.
Is there any explanation for why spending is up 154 billion? Because I just heard Elon Musk yesterday, or Thursday rather, I'm sorry, in the cabinet meeting saying that they've identified $150 billion in fraud, waste, and abuse that they have actually eliminated, on his way to identifying $1 trillion.
Yeah, I saw that Congress approved basically the same sort of budget. The same budget. It was just an extension of the previous budget. And so I think they're just sort of continuing to do the same sorts of things with built-in spending increases.
Right.
And so even though they're chipping away, they're finding some high-profile situations where there's waste, fraud, and abuse. And I cheer that on. Really, my only criticism of DOGE is that it's not going far enough and not going fast enough to decrease government spending. But like I said, it's an uphill climb. It'll be tough to actually cut the things that are significantly contributing to the huge size and scope of the government that we have today.
It's just mind-boggling to me. I saw Chuck Schumer on the news this morning, and he was really going at Elon Musk. If Musk is identified, and the stuff that they are identifying is, I can't even believe that we're having to intellectualize the appropriateness of it. to eliminate, $48,000 to a child that has not been born yet, and money going to people that are 150 years old. Supposedly there, I think, either 3 or 5 million people on the Social Security rolls that are over 150 years old. Now, I don't know if that means that they're getting payments, but they're on the rolls. Why would the left be attacking people that want to clean it up? Why couldn't every single living American cheer that on?
You would think in a rational society filled with people who are interested in getting rid of inefficiencies, you would think that anybody would be cheering on this effort to decrease those sorts of inefficiencies and overspending that are in our U.S. government. But of course, the way politics is now is purely tribal. So people on the right will rally around their central figures. People on the left will rally around their central figures. And anything that the other side does is terrible. And we're going to fight to the end against this enemy, right?
Well,
and the reason for that is because of just the political games that are being played.
I only personally want to rally around one thing, and that is the truth. And if it helps Democrats, so be it. If it helps Republicans, okay. But we seem to have to politicize everything. The sun came up this morning. It must be something to do with Elon Musk or those contrails that are in the sky. I mean, it's just gotten crazy.
Yeah,
So
I'm not sure. I think that's a great principle that you have to rally around the truth.
Yeah.
That's what we do here at the Mises Institute. We're very principled. We're going to take principled stands, and sometimes that means praising or saying what's happening is good, what this particular politician, this is a step in the right direction. But that also frees us to be able to criticize when that same person or that same policy has some downsides or has some things that are going to be detrimental to the American public. So I think that's great to stand on principle, stand on the truth, as opposed to following the crowd, following the madness of crowds.
yeah, I mean, that's truly what's in my heart and what I try and intellectually do. I consciously ask myself and work to try and make sure that what we're putting out on this program is in fact truthful and that we fact check it. But I want to ask you, what I was going to say is the only thing I question in my own mind is that every time I do that, it seems to lead me back to the right and to the Republican doctrine. And I mean, the Democrats, and I don't mean to sound partisan, but it's just a fact. They lie. They just simply don't tell the truth. And they demonizing Elon Musk is one of the brightest people on earth who's working for free. And I think he really does care about our country and wants a country that his children can grow up in and live with the benefits that you and I have enjoyed for the entirety of our lives. So we know that the federal deficit is roughly $2 trillion, and there appears to be a good resolve to try and balance the budget. I watched Howard Lutnick earlier this week. I've heard Secretary Bessent. It seems like that the administration is coalescing around the idea of reducing the spending by $2 trillion. Now, my question to you is, what happens if you do that? I mean, every time this country gets in economic turmoil and crisis, what do? We start printing money and spending it like crazy and labeling it stimulus. Mm-hmm. Well, if we take that money out of the economy, isn't that going to be deflationary? Don't we run the risk of sending the country into a slowdown, if not a recession?
There would definitely be some short-term pain as we make adjustments if there is a significant decrease in the size and scope of government. I mean, that's just, when you remove a tumor from a cancer patient, for example, there's a few days of recovery, but that doesn't mean that removing the tumor was a bad idea, right? So I mean, I view the short-term pain associated with decreases in the government spending the same way. But what's required is a change in people's understanding. What is required is a change in the psychology and the ideas that are out there among the public, because you're absolutely right. Whenever a crisis period comes, there's clamoring for the government to do something. There's this, if not a clamoring, there's at least a tolerance for the government to greatly expand in size and scope. And so the only way to change or to limit this ratchet effect, that's what that's called. The only way to change that is to change what's inside people's minds. It's to show them, here are the consequences of government spending. Here's what happens even in a crisis. If the government decides to expand its spending and print money, that's just going to result in more price inflation, business cycles, financial crises down the road. You're causing more long-term pain just because we're suffering some short-term pain right now. So there's got to be that mental change before we can have any sort of lasting, beneficial changes in the size and scope of government.
Well, so to eliminate any confusion that I may have raised in our listeners' minds, I'm all in. If it causes some pain, so be it. I mean, I'm ready for the cure, and using your analogy to cancer, if you've got to take radiation, it's not a good thing. Fortunately, I've dodged that bullet so far, but I have a lot of friends who have not, and I know that it is incredibly difficult to go through that kind of treatment. But to extend the metaphor, if that's what has to happen with our economy, but isn't there also an opportunity to counteract that? And where I'm coming from is that President Trump has said that there are $3 to $5 trillion of investment that is committed in our country right now by the likes of Apple and Johnson and the what is it, the Japanese investor,
Not sure.
what is it? I'm having a moment. The something bank. It'll come to me. I've got it in my notes over here. But just, I mean, literally trillions of dollars. That would have a stimulus effect, would it not? And result in huge gains in employment?
Yes, I mean, it would, especially for those industries in which they're employed. Now, I don't think that tariffs are the way to bring that sort of thing about. So, if a company wants to invest in the United States and set up manufacturing, set up a business that employs people, I'm all for that. But it should be based on what our comparative advantages are. It should be based on what's profitable in the free market and based on the global division of labor and free trade. If we have to protect businesses and particular industries by erecting large tariffs to protect them from foreign competition, then that's just another tax. That's just another government intervention that's trying to, manipulate what's going on inside the economy. I think it's better to allow those sorts of things to happen on the market based on what entrepreneurs think is profitable. And so my number one recommendation is to decrease regulations, decrease the size and scope of government so that the U.S. is an attractive place to start a business and start employing people. I think that erecting trade barriers is not the way to go about that.
SoftBank, that's what I was trying to think of.
Okay.
And they've committed, I think, 100 million, or is it 400 million? I don't know, but a lot of money. But yes, I'm a free trader. I'm not in favor of tariffs to help favor one industry over another. But what about where we're just getting the short end of the stick in virtually every trading partner with whom we do business? And like Germany, I mean, we tax their cars, tariff their cars 2.5%. They tariff ours 10%. Give me an intellectual argument why that makes sense for us.
Well, I think that it's possible for those sorts of tariffs to be used in a way to bring overall tariffs down. Now, I'll put a big asterisk right there. While it is possible for overall trade barriers to decrease if we try to do the reciprocal treatment, like if one country is tariffing us a certain amount, we're going to do the same thing to them, right, with the overall goal being to decrease trade barriers. The other possibility is that it spirals in the other direction, like what's happening between the U.S. and China right now, where tariffs go, I think last I saw, they're up to 125%, yeah, which is just massive. That's huge. And if that persists over a few days or weeks or months, then that could be very detrimental to productivity in the U.S. and also, just consumer standards of living here in the United States. Well, I think it's possible to use tariffs as that sort of like political strategy. Although I'm sort of skeptical. I think it's best to lead by example, to allow people to trade across borders. One other thing that I'll say on this is that I don't think that a trade deficit is by itself an indication that there's something unfair or unsustainable or bad for the U.S. Because if you think about it from any one person's perspective, they have a trade deficit with their local grocery store, where money is going from your household to the grocery store, and that's only going in one direction, unless you're employed by the grocery store. And goods and services are coming in the other direction. So there's nothing that's unfair about that. There's nothing that's unsustainable about that. Of course, people can overspend. People can go into debt, buying things. And so in that case, the trade deficit would indicate something that's, not healthy. But the trade deficit by itself isn't necessarily an indication of something that's unsustainable or unfair.
Well, doesn't it amount to a subsidy from the United States to the foreign government that is getting the benefit of a tariff that is not at parity with what we are charging them? I mean, I got the grocery store. I'm a capitalist. I own businesses. I do it for one, because I enjoy it, but mainly because, let's just get real. I like to make money. What's the matter with that? You just said it. But so the grocery store, if they can make a profit, fine. But there's also competition. If I don't like their head of lettuce, I can go over to from Publix to Kroger. I mean, I've got choices. But if you're determined to get a BMW, you don't really have a choice if it's going to come from Germany or pick up a Lexus from they made in Japan, I think.
That's right. Yeah.
So I mean, if they're tariffing us more than we're tariffing them, that's not a free market phenomenon. That's a governmental influence.
Yeah, you're exactly right. But it's the other government, it's the foreign government that's really hampering that country's own trade. Of course, there are detrimental effects on both sides, and that's why I do sort of leave a tiny crack in the door to allow for the use of tariffs to try to negotiate lower overall trade barriers. I think that can work, but it's not guaranteed. But the way that I view another country using tariffs is that they're shooting themselves in the foot. And it doesn't make sense to me to shoot ourselves in the foot in response to another country that's shooting itself in the foot, unless it's a part of this strategy that I was talking about, trying to decrease overall trade barriers. It's a very nuanced discussion, but just to be very clear for your listeners, I'm on the free trade side, and I think the best course of action is no trade barriers.
You certainly made that
allow
clear.
the global division of labor to work.
Yes, I think that when a country, let's pick on China, and I want to talk about China in a minute also. I think there's more to talk about with China and trade than with tariffs and the rest of the world. I mean, I think that there are other things that we're witnessing that are in play here other than pure economic concerns. But if you have a country, I don't know, pick it, but certainly China is a good one. They don't have labor laws. They include and use child labor. They don't have environmental protection. They pollute our oceans, and their products, for the most part, are inferior. But then they get to sell them at significantly lower prices than it would cost to manufacture that same product in the United States. So it seems to me that the Chinese government is saying, okay, we've allowed all of this. Now you're able to, Mr. China businessman, you're able to sell all these products abroad. We want our cut of the action. That's kind of the way it seems to me, and that makes up some of the disparity between the low-cost producer and a U.S. manufacturer.
Yeah, and this is why I was saying I think that the U.S.'s best way to bring back good paying jobs, if we're interested in having more manufacturing jobs in the U.S. and also bring down the the total cost of goods that are produced in the U.S., we have to remove our own regulations.
Get rid of the regulations, no question.
So make it very attractive to do business here in the U.S. Low taxes, low regulation, make it easy for people to start businesses, and then either succeed or fail. I totally believe in the profit and loss mechanism. I think that also applies to the way that consumers perceive products that are made in China. So if consumers see products that are made in China with child labor, things that are sort of repugnant, things that we don't like, or pollution, that sort of thing, I think that's something that if and to the extent we don't like that, then that will be reflected in our own purchasing decisions, just like we see in domestic markets. If some country develops a bad reputation, or some company develops a bad reputation for doing something reprehensible, then the market punishes that. People stop buying the good and they switch to some other product, some other firm that produces something similar, right? So I think the same thing can happen on a global scale, and so what we need is just allow the market to do its work. Don't get governments involved, because they're only going to cause all of these unintended consequences that usually lead to further government intervention to fix all the problems that were caused by the original government intervention.
So it just sets up a vicious cycle of increased government intervention and meddling. So with respect to China, we've had Peter Schweitzer on the show. He is the author of Red Handed and another more recent publication about all the enmeshing of China, not only with American industry, but with our leaders. And we watched a spy balloon, and there were multiple of them. One got talked about in the mainstream media. We learned that there were others that floated across our country, undeterred, hovering over our most sensitive nuclear bases. We've seen fentanyl flooding into our country at the southern and northern border, enough to kill every living American. And we thought that we were being told that there were 10,000 perhaps military aged fit men who came in from China into the United States. We now know that that number is more like 100,000. And I'm sorry, that's an army. That's not a few people here on holiday, and they've been dispersed throughout the heartland of America. My sense is that where while trade might be the focal point with these other countries, General Robert Spalding calls it stealth war. He says that we are at war with China, and I'm just wondering if President Trump doesn't recognize that, and he's saying, fellas, you may want to have a war with the United States, but we're not going to help finance it any longer. And it seems to me he's hitting them where it hurts the most. What do you think?
Yeah, it's possible that is something that's driving the policies toward China. In fact, some people will say that we need to use tariffs to protect particular industries if we don't want to be dependent on a potential enemy to produce the things that we need to wage war. Right. So we need to use the argument goes this way. We think that this country is a threat to us, and in the case we do enter into conflict with them, we don't want to be dependent on them to produce tanks, airplanes, weapons, pharmaceuticals, medical equipment, all that sort of thing. And so people will say that this is a good argument for tariffs. Could be. I think that there are some better tools if you want to protect those certain industries that allow us to be prepared to defend ourselves. I think a subsidy is better. Subsidize those particular industries. I'm not a fan of subsidies, don't get me wrong, but if there's a choice between those two, I think subsidies are the better tool. And here's why. Subsidies, we are transparent. We can see exactly how much it's costing the taxpayer to subsidize this particular industry. And of course, it can be explained. Hey, taxpayer, the reason why we're subsidizing this industry is for defense preparedness. So it's transparent, and also it doesn't have as many unintended consequences and economic distortions throughout the economy. There are some, but they're more localized. They're not as pervasive compared to tariffs. So if you use a tariff to try to do the same thing, then every single manufacturer that uses that particular product that's sourced from the other country, all of the different industries that are affected, they get distorted, costs rise, makes it harder to do business. And so there's all of these spread out consequences as opposed to a subsidy that can be more targeted.
How would you feel about subsidies for American farmers? I mean, they are Americana. And right now, my understanding is like for beef farmers, cattle, people that raise cattle for beef, that they're having a difficult time competing because we do have health regulations about what you can and cannot feed cattle and what antibiotics and steroids you can and cannot give to them. Yet foreign producers have none of those limitations. They're able to grow bigger cows and chop them up, send them to America for a lot less money. So subsidies for American farmers?
I would say in the same way that we were looking at two different policies, tariffs or subsidies for national defense preparedness, and now we're looking at either regulations or subsidies or removal of regulations and subsidies. I'm totally in favor of removing the regulations. I don't think subsidies are, I don't think there's a good rationale to subsidize those industries when the only reason that they're falling behind, they're not doing so well, is because of the onerous regulations that our government is putting on them.
All right, so Jonathan, in the moments we have remaining, I am in the process of writing a term paper just because I want to, and it's called "Trump is Remaking the United States Economy." And my points are, we have already seen a significant reduction in inflation. It's come down from 3% to 2.4% just in a matter of 60 days, and it's mainly because of reduction in the price of oil. We have seen the unemployment rate sticky and not moving really, and it's hovering right at 4%. Deregulation is a focal point of the Trump administration. They've imposed an executive order that says for every one regulation that the bureaucrat wants to create, he's got to get rid of 10 others. the United States Congress is debating at this very moment tax cuts and making the Trump cuts permanent. And then the tariffs that we spent a good amount of time on, it sounds to me, could create a windfall for the United States Treasury. And in the process, if all of these things come true, you add on top of that AI and the influence of robotics, are we on the verge of ushering in an age of abundance and the golden age as Trump describes?
Possibly. I mean, I agree with the trajectory of all of those things that you listed. I think it's great that we're decreasing taxes, decreasing regulations. I even think that it's better to collect taxes as tariffs as opposed to something as pernicious and evil as income taxes, right?
Me too.
So I think all of these moves they're good moves. They're at least steps in the right direction. Now I might not be as optimistic as you are, though, in terms of are we going to enter a new golden age, simply because I see Congress, right, as in order for there to be any sort of lasting change in terms of like the size and scope of government, it's going to require an act of acts of Congress to do that. And of course, all of the incentives of the people who are inside Congress are to keep the status quo, increase government spending, increase regulations so that they can, favor certain vested interests, and they get the kickbacks, they get the campaign contributions. So I think it would be great. And also I agree that there's some, very promising looking technological innovations with AI and robotics. I think that these are all, steps in the right direction. They look promising, but I don't know if I would call myself an optimist, because I'm just looking at the government and the way that it's set up right now, and it doesn't give me a lot of hope.
You're an optimist, only tempered by realism of what is practical in our complex governmental system, it sounds like. And Jonathan, I've thoroughly enjoyed speaking with you. I hope you'll come back. This is stuff that I don't have near the level of comprehension that you do, but I love to engage in it and learn about it. So thank you for a wonderful, stimulating conversation. Jonathan Newman, a fellow at the Mises Institute, and that is Dr. Jonathan Newman, by the way.
Thank you so much for having me on.
My pleasure.